The mining outpost on Proxima B was as close to nowhere as Eli Thorne could get, exactly what a disgraced military captain needed. 6 years since Earth's forces had retreated from the Centauri conflict, leaving behind more questions than victories, and Eli still found himself running from the memories. His surveyor job was simple: scout remote locations, file reports, move on, no attachments, no complications. Until tonight. The meteor shower had been spectacular, a cascade of burning light across Proxima's perpetual dusk. Except one of those lights had changed course, spiraling down into the northern ridge. Curiosity, or perhaps the soldier's instinct he couldn't quite shake, pulled him toward the crash site. "This is how horror vids start," Eli muttered to himself, adjusting the oxygen filter on his face. Proxima's atmosphere was breathable but thin, leaving humans perpetually lightheaded without assistance. The wreckage wasn't a meteor but unmistakably a ship, sleek, obsidian, with the angular geometry favored by species from the Orion arm. Eli approached cautiously, his hand instinctively reaching for the sidearm he no longer carried. A soft, rhythmic sound caught his attention. Not the crackle of flames or the hiss of venting coolant, but something organic, something alive. The escape pod was embedded in the ridge, its hatch partially open. Inside, nestled in a cushion of synthetic material that seemed to pulse with its own light, was a creature unlike any Eli had encountered across 17 worlds. It was small, perhaps the size of a human infant, but with iridescent scales that shifted from deep purple to midnight blue. Where a human child would have hair, this being had delicate tendrils that moved independently, sensing the environment. Its eyes, when they opened to regard Eli, were entirely black with flecks of silver, like the night sky itself. "Well," Eli breathed, "you're definitely not local." The creature made a sound, a trilling that vibrated in Eli's chest rather than his ears. Not unpleasant, but alien in every sense. Around the pod, Eli found scattered tech. A quantum beacon, damaged but still pulsing faintly. A data crystal glowing with stored information. And most notably, a symbol etched into the pod's interior, a spiral surrounded by 3 stars. "The Zalthorian Empire," he whispered, his blood running cold. Everyone knew of the Zalthorians, the most feared species in the known galaxy. Ruled by a queen rumored to have conquered 50 systems in her lifetime, they were rarely seen but universally dreaded. Mankind's brief encounters with them had been tense diplomatic exchanges, not outright conflict, but the stories persisted. The infant trilled again, louder this time. Its tendrils reached toward Eli, not threatening but almost pleading. "I can't just leave you," Eli said, though he knew taking an alien child, particularly a Zalthorian, was possibly the worst decision he could make. But the alternative was abandoning it to the harsh Proxima night, where temperatures dropped well below freezing. His decision was made for him when the distant sound of engines cut through the air. More ships approaching fast. "Time to go, little one?" Eli carefully lifted the child, surprised by how light it was. The infant curled against his chest, tendrils wrapping gently around his wrist. "I'll call you Nova, seems fitting considering how you arrived." As Eli vanished into the rocky terrain with Nova secure in his arms, he couldn't know that across the galaxy, Queen Vexara of the Zalthorian Empire had just received word that her royal heir's signal had been detected, in the hands of a human. Queen Vexara's chambers aboard the Imperial warship Midnight Talon vibrated with her fury. The royal guards stationed at the entrance remained perfectly still, their 4-fingered hands gripping ceremonial spears that could discharge enough energy to vaporize a small vehicle. They had learned long ago that movement during the Queen's rage only invited attention, and potentially death. "You are certain the signal belongs to the royal heir?" Vexara's voice was unnaturally calm, belying the storm of emotions beneath. Her scaled skin, normally a deep indigo, had darkened to almost black with emotion. Commander Krell, kneeling before her, kept his gaze lowered. "Yes, my queen. The genetic marker is unmistakable. Your offspring lives, but is in the possession of a human on the mining outpost of Proxima B." Vexara's silver-flecked eyes narrowed. "A human, one of those soft, emotional creatures." She rose from her throne, her ceremonial battle armor clicking softly as she moved to the viewport. Stars streaked by as the massive warship hurried toward the Centauri system. Perhaps this was not part of High Chancellor Drax's plan, she mused, to have the heir fall into human hands. The High Chancellor sends his deepest concerns, my queen, Krell offered carefully. He has already dispatched additional forces to assist in your recovery mission. Vexara's tendrils rippled with suspicion. Since the abduction of her child 3 cycles ago, she had trusted no one, not even Drax, her chief advisor for over 20 rotations. Something about his consolations felt hollow, his assistance too measured. I will recover my heir personally, she announced. And if this human has harmed my offspring in any way, I will ensure their suffering becomes legendary even among their own kind. Eli hadn't slept in 3 days. Nova, as he continued to call the alien child, required constant attention. The infant didn't eat like humans. Instead, Eli discovered it absorbed nutrients from a bioluminescent solution he'd found in the escape pod. When that ran out, he experimented with similar compounds until finding one that caused Nova's scales to brighten with satisfaction. You're a demanding little royal, aren't you? Eli murmured as Nova's tendrils playfully wrapped around his fingers. He'd converted his small survey hut into a makeshift nursery, using the pod's cushioning material to create a comfortable nest. The data crystal he'd recovered contained information he couldn't fully translate, but enough to confirm his suspicions. Nova was Zalthorian royalty, which made his current situation somewhere between kidnapping and high treason against the most powerful empire in the galaxy. A sharp beeping from his perimeter sensors jolted him to attention. Someone was approaching, and fast. Time to use our escape plan, Nova. Eli quickly packed the essentials into a bag, secured Nova in a makeshift carrier across his chest, and slipped out the back of the shelter just as the sound of vessels landing echoed across the rocky terrain. Through his binoculars, Eli spotted them, sleek black ships bearing the Zalthorian insignia. And exiting the largest vessel was a figure that could only be the Queen herself, her armor glinting in Proxima's perpetual sunset, a squad of warriors flanking her. That's your mom, kid, Eli whispered. Probably should return you, but something tells me they'll kill the messenger. Nova trilled softly, tendrils tightening around Eli's wrist. Yeah, I've got a bad feeling too. As if confirming his fears, a second group of ships appeared on the horizon, similar in design but bearing a slightly altered insignia. The new arrivals took up offensive positions, not against Eli, but against the Queen's forces. Internal conflict, Eli muttered in confusion as he retreated further into the ridge caves. That's unexpected. Vexara hissed in frustration as her scanners picked up the approaching ships. Drax sends forces that position themselves as if for combat. Explain this, Commander. Krell's expression remained impassive. Perhaps they are merely being cautious, my queen. The human could be dangerous. A single human? Her laugh was cold. Do not insult my intelligence. She activated her personal shield and drew her ceremonial blade, a weapon that had tasted the blood of 100 conquered species. Find my heir, I will deal with this complication. As the Queen strode forward, her senses, far superior to those of humans, detected a faint trace of her child's pheromones on the wind. The air was close, moving away, accompanied by the unmistakable scent of human. For the first time since the abduction, Vexara felt something beyond rage and vengeance, a flicker of hope that nearly overwhelmed her warrior's composure. Her offspring lived. Everything else, the suspicious behavior of Drax's forces, the human, even the throne itself, was secondary. I am coming, my child, she whispered, her tendrils extending toward the scent. And nothing in this universe will stand between us again. The cave system beneath Proxima B's northern ridge was a labyrinth of crystalline formations and underground streams, perfect for hiding, terrible for escaping. Eli pressed deeper into the network, Nova secured against his chest, the alien child unusually quiet as if sensing the danger. Just a little further, Eli whispered, though he had no destination in mind. His military training had taught him survival, not miracle escapes from alien empires. A sound echoed through the tunnel behind them, the distinct click of armored boots on stone. Eli ducked into a narrow side passage, pressing his back against the cool rock. Nova's tendrils twitched against his skin, and the infant made a soft, trilling sound that Eli quickly muffled with his hand. "SHHH, little one," he breathed. The footsteps grew closer, accompanied by the hum of energy weapons. Eli closed his eyes, calculating his options. Running would make noise. Fighting was suicide. Surrender might mean death for him, but safety for Nova, unless the faction hunting them wasn't actually here to rescue the child. The choice was made for him when a scaled hand clamped over his mouth from behind. "Do not move, human," a feminine voice hissed directly into his ear, the words heavily accented but unmistakably in English. "My enemies approach. If you value your life and that of my heir, remain still." Eli froze, recognizing the voice from historical transmissions he'd studied during military training. Queen Vexara herself had found him first. The queen's free hand moved to Nova, her long fingers hovering just above the child without touching. Eli felt her body tense against his back, saw her tendrils extend toward the infant in what he somehow recognized as longing. Nova's response was immediate and unexpected. The child's tendrils reached back, intertwining with the queen's in what appeared to be recognition. A soft, harmonic trilling filled the small space between them. "You've cared for my child," the queen whispered, surprise evident in her voice. It wasn't a question. Before Eli could respond, the sound of approaching soldiers grew louder. The queen's hand tightened over his mouth again as 6 armored Zalthorians passed by their hiding spot, weapons drawn. "Those are not my loyal guards," she murmured once they had passed. "They bear Drax's personal insignia. He betrays me openly now." She released Eli, who turned to face her fully for the first time. The queen of the Zalthorian Empire was tall, nearly 7 feet, with scaled skin that shifted between deep purple and midnight blue. Her face was regal, with high cheekbones and those characteristic black eyes flecked with silver. Unlike the tendrils of her infant, which were soft and undeveloped, hers were longer, stronger, moving with deliberate precision. "Your child was in an escape pod," Eli said, finding his voice. "Crashed 3 days ago. I couldn't leave." He trailed off as the queen's gaze intensified. "You named my heir Nova," she stated flatly. Eli swallowed. "I needed to call them something." "Her," the queen corrected. "My daughter's name is Vexilith, 7th of her name, future Empress of the 50 systems and the void beyond." A pause. "But Nova, it is not without meaning, starbirth from destruction." Her tendrils twitched almost thoughtfully. A distant explosion rocked the cave, sending dust and crystal shards raining down on them. Nova, or Vexilith, began to wail, a sound that resonated painfully in Eli's chest. The queen's expression hardened. "We cannot remain. Drax's forces will use seismic charges to flush us out." She fixed Eli with a penetrating stare. "Human, you have kept my daughter alive when my own kind sought to destroy her. I offer you a choice. Aid me in escaping this planet with my heir, and you may live, refuse, and die here." "That's not much of a choice," Eli said dryly. "It is more than my kind typically offer yours," she replied without humor. Another explosion closer this time. Nova's cries intensified. "She trusts you," the queen observed, watching how her daughter clung to Eli. Something unreadable crossed her alien features. "Perhaps that is worth something." Eli adjusted Nova in his arms, soothing her with a gentle rocking motion that the queen watched with fascination. "I know a way out," he decided. "A maintenance tunnel that leads to the secondary landing pads, but we'll need to hurry and," he hesitated, "Your Majesty, you're somewhat conspicuous." The queen's lips curved in what might have been a smile on a human face. "I am not without resources, Eli Thorne." She touched a device on her armor, and a shimmer passed over her body, altering her appearance to that of a human woman, still tall, but no longer obviously alien. "How did you know my name?" Eli asked, startled. "I know everything about the human who took my child," she replied simply. "Now move. Our alliance begins with survival." As they navigated the twisting tunnels, Nova nestled between them, Eli couldn't shake the feeling that the universe had just tilted on its axis. The most feared ruler in the galaxy was following his lead, trusting him with her heir's life, and something in her silver-flecked eyes told him this alliance would reshape more than just their immediate futures. The small transport vessel Eli had borrowed from the mining outpost barely accommodated the 3 of them. Queen Vexara sat awkwardly in the co-pilot's seat, her holographic human disguise flickering occasionally as the ship's outdated systems struggled to maintain power to all functions. "Your technology is primitive," she observed as Eli coaxed the engines to life. "It gets the job done," he replied, not looking up from the controls. "And it's less likely to be tracked than anything Zalthorian." Nova, Vexilith, slept peacefully in a makeshift carrier between them, her tendrils occasionally twitching in what Eli had come to recognize as dreams. The Queen's gaze constantly returned to her daughter, a complex emotion playing across her features. "You still have not explained how my heir came to be in that escape pod," Eli said as they broke Proxima B's atmosphere. "Or why your own people seem divided on finding her." The Queen was silent for so long that Eli thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice carried an unfamiliar weight. "When a Zalthorian ruler produces an heir, it is traditionally a time of great celebration and vulnerability." She seemed to choose her words carefully. "For 10 cycles of the sacred moon, the royal parent and child remain in seclusion, forming the telepathic bond that will one day transfer power." "And someone didn't want that to happen," Eli guessed. Vexara's holographic human features hardened. "High Chancellor Drax has served as my chief advisor since I took the throne. He has guided military campaigns, negotiated surrenders, executed traitors at my command." Her silver-flecked eyes met Eli's. "3 lunar cycles ago, as I slept beside my newborn daughter, Drax's personal guard entered my chambers and took Vexalith." The bitterness in her voice was palpable. "I awoke to alarms and accusations that human spies had infiltrated the palace and stolen the heir. Drax organized the search, directed our forces to human outposts, executed suspects. All while my daughter was hidden away, to be disposed of or perhaps raised as a puppet under his control." "But why?" Eli asked. "What would he gain?" "Everything," Vexara replied simply. "Without an heir upon my death, the ruling council would select a successor from among the highest bloodlines. Drax's lineage makes him the obvious choice. And with an heir who's too young to rule. He would serve as regent until she reached maturity, if she ever did." The Queen's tendrils rippled with barely contained rage. "I was a fool not to see it. For 20 rotations he has stood beside me, patiently waiting, cultivating allies, positioning his loyalists in key positions." Eli absorbed this information as he plotted a course away from the Centauri system. "So now what? You can't go back to your empire. Drax controls your military, and he thinks you're still on Proxima B." "Not all of my military," Vexara corrected. "The Royal Guard answers only to the throne, and there are commanders whose loyalty to me supersedes any political ambition." Nova stirred between them, making a soft, trilling sound. Without thinking, both Eli and the Queen reached to soothe her at the same time, their hands meeting over the child. Vexara did not immediately pull away, her gaze fixed on Eli's hand covering hers. "You care for her," she said quietly. "A child not of your species, your bloodline, why?" Eli shrugged, suddenly uncomfortable under her intense scrutiny. "She needed help, that's reason enough." "For humans, perhaps." The Queen slowly withdrew her hand. "My kind would say such sentiment is weakness." "Is that what you believe?" Vexara's tendrils twisted in a gesture Eli couldn't interpret. "I believed many things before my own advisor stole my child." She glanced at the ship's navigation screen. "Where are you taking us?" "Abandoned research station in the Kuiper Belt. Decommissioned after the Centauri conflict, but the life support should still work. We can hide there, figure out our next move." The Queen nodded, then abruptly tensed. "Power down all non-essential systems, now." Eli didn't question her, immediately cutting power to everything except life support and minimal propulsion. Moments later, the ship's sensors, now operating in passive mode, detected a massive vessel passing within 1,000 kilometers of their position. "Imperial destroyer," Vexara whispered. "Drax must have deployed my personal fleet." They watched in silence as the enormous warship continued past them, unaware of their presence. When it was finally out of range, Eli released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "That was close." The Queen's holographic disguise had fully failed during the power reduction, revealing her true form once more. In the dim emergency lighting, her scales caught what little illumination remained, creating patterns of light and shadow across her regal features. "You have good instincts, Eli Thorne," she said, studying him with new interest. "You would have made a worthy commander in my forces." "I've had enough of war," Eli replied quietly. Something in his tone made the Queen tilt her head. "You carry wounds deeper than flesh." "Don't we all?" He reactivated the ship's systems, careful to maintain minimal power signatures. "We should reach the station in about 6 hours. You should rest while you can." Vexara seemed about to say something else, then simply nodded. Wake me if my daughter needs me. As the queen closed her eyes, one of her tendrils remained extended, lightly touching Nova's sleeping form. Eli watched the connection between mother and child, feeling like an intruder on something ancient and sacred. Yet as the small ship continued its cautious journey through the darkness, he couldn't ignore the strange new feeling taking root within him, something beyond duty or compassion that tied him to the alien queen and her daughter. Something that, despite all his efforts to remain detached, felt dangerously like belonging. The abandoned research station hung in space like a forgotten memory, its angular structure barely visible against the backdrop of distant stars. Inside, the recycled air carried a metallic tang that reminded Eli of his military days aboard cramped transport ships. A lifetime ago, it seemed. The communication array still functions, Eli announced, emerging from the station's control center. Basic encryption only, but it should be enough to... He stopped short. In the makeshift living area they had established, Queen Vexara sat cross-legged on the floor, Nova cradled in her arms. The infant's tendrils were fully intertwined with her mother's, both of their scaled bodies emitting a soft phosphorescent glow. Sorry, Eli whispered, turning to leave. Stay, Vexara commanded, though her voice lacked its usual imperial edge. The bonding ritual can continue in your presence. You have earned that much. Eli hesitated, then sat at a respectful distance. What exactly is happening between you? The queen's silver-flecked eyes remained on her daughter. I am sharing memories, knowledge. The neural pathways established now will one day allow the transfer of imperial consciousness, thousands of years of collected wisdom passed from ruler to heir. Like a biological data transfer, Eli mused. Vexara's mouth curved slightly. A crude comparison, but not entirely inaccurate. She gently stroked Nova's head. In time, she will inherit not only my throne, but my understanding of it. And what will she learn about humans? Eli asked quietly. The queen's gaze lifted to meet his. That is yet to be determined. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by Nova's occasional trilling sounds of contentment. After several minutes, Vexara carefully untangled her tendrils from her daughters and handed the drowsy infant to Eli. Your hands, she observed as he took Nova, they are different from ours, yet she finds comfort in them. Eli cradled the child with practiced ease. Children adapt quickly. As must rulers. The queen rose gracefully to her feet. What have you discovered about our communication options? We can send encrypted messages to your loyalists, but there's a risk any transmission could be intercepted. Eli settled Nova into the sleeping pod they'd fashioned from station materials. Do you trust these commanders enough to reach out? Trust is a luxury I no longer possess, Vexara replied. But necessity demands action. Prepare the transmission. 3 days later, their gamble paid off. A single Zalthorian scout ship arrived at the station, bearing Commander Thalrix, whose scarred face reflected decades of service to the throne. My queen, he knelt before Vexara in the docking bay, his warrior's frame dwarfing Eli's. You honor me with your trust. Rise, old friend, the queen commanded. What news of the Empire? Thalrix's expression darkened. Drax has declared a period of imperial mourning. He claims your ship was destroyed by human terrorists on Proxima B, killing both you and the heir. The council prepares to name him regent until a suitable successor can be determined. How convenient for him, Eli muttered. Thalrix regarded the human with suspicion. This is the one who took the heir. This is the one who saved her, Vexara corrected firmly, and who now aids us in our return. Her tendrils shifted in what Eli had come to recognize as determination. How many ships remain loyal to me? The Third Fleet stands ready at the edge of the Halcyon Nebula, awaiting your command. Admiral Currix personally guarantees their loyalty. And the Royal Guard? Divided, Thalrix admitted. Drax has imprisoned those who questioned his version of events. Others serve him, believing they honor your memory. The Queen absorbed this information, her regal features betraying no emotion. Prepare your ship, Commander. We depart within the hour. As Thalrix returned to his vessel, Vexara turned to Eli. The coming conflict will not be bloodless. War rarely is, he replied, checking the makeshift carrier where Nova now slept. But sometimes it's necessary. The queen studied him, her head tilting slightly. You have seen battle before. Too much of it? Eli secured the last of their meager supplies. But this one matters more than most. Because of my daughter? Vexara asked. Eli paused, considering his words carefully. Because of both of you. Something shifted in the queen's expression, a subtle softening of her regal composure. She stepped closer, her scaled hand reaching up to touch his face. The contact sent an unexpected warmth through him. In all my centuries, she said softly, I have never understood your kind, your contradictions, your emotions, your willingness to sacrifice for those not of your blood. Her tendrils moved forward, brushing against his cheek with surprising gentleness. Until now. The moment lingered between them, electric and fragile. Then Nova trilled from her carrier, breaking the spell. She knows we're leaving, Eli said, clearing his throat. Vexara nodded, withdrawing her hand. She senses the change that comes. The battle for the Imperial Palace unfolded with brutal efficiency. Vexara's loyal forces struck from multiple fronts, catching Drax's defenses unprepared for an attack from a queen believed dead. Eli, despite his protests, remained aboard the command vessel with Nova, monitoring communications and coordinating strikes based on his military experience. The Eastern Quadrant is secured, Commander Thalrix reported. The Royal Guard has turned on Drax's forces. They rally to your banner, my queen. On the main view screen, Vexara stood amidst the chaos of battle, her ceremonial armor gleaming with the blood of her enemies, tendrils extended in the ancient battle posture of her kind. She was magnificent and terrible, every inch the conqueror that legends described. Drax attempts to flee to the outer sanctum, she informed them, her voice cold with fury. Cut off his escape. I will take him myself. The final confrontation was broadcast throughout the vessel. Eli watched as the queen cornered her betrayer in the throne room, forcing him to his knees before the imperial seat. You were my trusted advisor, Vexara's voice rang out. Yet you stole my child, betrayed your oath, and sought to claim what was never yours to take. Drax, his scaled features twisted with hatred, spat at her feet. You grew weak when that abomination was born. The Empire requires strength, not maternal sentiment. You mistake compassion for weakness, the queen replied, raising her ceremonial blade. A fatal error. Eli turned away from the screen as justice was delivered, focusing instead on Nova, who watched the proceedings with an unnerving awareness in her silver-flecked eyes. Your mother is coming home, he told her softly, and so are you. The imperial coronation chamber glittered with crystalline light, packed with dignitaries from 50 systems. Queen Vexara, restored to her throne, sat with Nova, officially recognized as Imperial Heir Vexilith, beside her. Eli stood awkwardly in ceremonial attire that had been crafted specifically for him, the first human to ever receive the honor of Imperial Protector. The people whisper about us, Vexara said quietly as another delegation presented their gifts to the heir. They cannot comprehend what exists between an alien queen and a human soldier. Can you? Eli asked, watching as Nova's tendrils reached happily toward each new visitor. I am still learning, the queen admitted, her hand finding his between their seats hidden from public view. But I have centuries to understand it fully if you are willing to stay that long. Eli's fingers intertwined with hers, scaled and smooth against his calloused skin. I'm not going anywhere. Nova would never forgive me. Vexara's tendrils brushed against his arm in the gesture he now recognized as affection. Nor would I, my imperial protector. As the ceremonies continued, Eli reflected on the strange path that had led him here, from a disgraced captain to the trusted companion of the galaxy's most powerful ruler and her heir. The universe had many names for what had developed between them: alliance, friendship, perhaps even love. But standing beside Vexara and Nova, watching the future unfold before them, Eli settled on the simplest truth. It was, against all odds, home.